Standing on the red sand of the Strzelecki Desert, there is little to interrupt the eye except low dunes, spinifex, and a single wire fence running straight to the salt horizon. It looks like an ordinary boundary line between pastoral leases. Yet beneath this flat surface lies one of the sharpest geophysical and jurisdictional fractures on the Australian continent. For more than a century, surveyors and geologists passed over these vast, arid stretches, assuming the country was uniform, stable, and completely understood. Why did some of the continent's most profound structural anomalies, legal contradictions, and buried records remain overlooked in plain view for generations? From the subterranean drainage of the Great Artesian Basin to a survey post placed hundreds of meters out of position that required a court ruling to settle, the interior holds dozens of documented puzzles. Across the continent, 35 distinct anomalies challenge the official maps. Number 35. The town bombed by an accidental drop. In the Second World War training exercises across regional Australia, inland towns often sat directly beneath live flight paths. In Western Australia, crews flying out of coastal staging bases near Pearce navigated by dead reckoning across featureless scrub where visual markers were non-existent. Navigational offsets of tens of kilometres occurred across the unlit expanses of the wheatbelt. When practice charges fell off target into pastoral ground near rural settlements, local shire councils recorded the craters in road maintenance ledgers rather than military archives, leaving physical indentations in claypans that can still be traced today. Number 34. The inverted river of basalt. In Western Victoria, the highest relief across farming districts is not an uplifted mountain range, but a solidified lava flow known as the Mount Rouse flow in the newer Volcanics province. Several million years ago, fluid basaltic lava filled ancient river channels. Because basalt resists erosion far better than the surrounding softer sedimentary rock, millions of years of weathering wore away the flanking valleys. The ancient riverbed was left standing as a raised, winding ridge above the plains, an inverted topography where water once ran at the lowest point, now crowning the highest ground. Number 33. The dam that never filled. In the semi-arid catchment of the Murray-Darling Basin, engineering works were repeatedly designed on rainfall figures from exceptionally wet decades. Menindee Lakes on the Darling River, formalized into an engineered storage scheme in the mid-20th century with massive regulators and earthen levees, was built to hold billions of litres of water to secure downstream irrigation. Yet because upstream extraction in Queensland and northern New South Wales rapidly increased alongside evaporation rates exceeding 2 metres annually, vast shallow expanses of the system frequently sit dry as bare clay beds, leaving boat ramps terminating in dusty saltbush. Number 32. The Goyder Line Divide. In South Australia, an invisible line surveyed in 1865 by Surveyor General George Goyder marks the boundary between sustainable rain-fed agriculture and total crop failure. Drawn after a devastating drought by observing the northern limit of native saltbush and bluebush, Goyder established that country receiving less than about 300 millimetres of annual rainfall would not sustain cereal cropping. Settlers pushed past the line during wet years, building stone homesteads and railway sidings. When dry seasons returned, the crops withered completely, leaving ruined towns across the upper north as permanent physical proof of an ecological boundary that cannot be negotiated. Number 31. The megafauna graveyard of the Dry Lakes. In the dry claypans of Lake Callabonna in the far north of South Australia, the arid mud preserves thousands of articulated skeletons of giant extinct marsupials. Diprotodon optatum, a wombat-like herbivore weighing over 2 tons, became trapped in sticky salt mud tens of thousands of years ago as the ancient lake dried out. When collectors from the South Australian Museum excavated the site in 1893, they found intact skeletons preserved by rapid desiccation and mineral salts, hidden beneath a featureless crust of wind-blown sand. Number 30. The legal void on the river border. Along the Murray River between Victoria and New South Wales, the legal border was defined by the Imperial Parliament in 1855 as the watermark on the southern bank. Because the southern bank shifts with every flood, islands and sandbars regularly detached and reattached, creating parcels of land where state police forces routinely disputed jurisdiction over gambling dens and unlicensed grog shanties that operated in the muddy, unpoliced zones between low and high water. Number 29. Alpine species on a burning plateau. High on the isolated sandstone tops of the Mount Kaputar Plateau in northern New South Wales, temperatures drop significantly compared to the surrounding hot plains of the Namoy Valley. This volcanic remnant, rising over 1,500 meters above sea level, preserves a relict ecosystem containing the giant pink slug, Triboniophorus graphi, and subalpine snowgums that survived post-glacial drying by retreating up the mountain, marooned on an ecological island surrounded by dry eucalyptus woodland. Number 28. The drainage network that flows into stone. Across the arid interior of Western Australia, ancient paleochannels dating back over 50 million years to the Eocene epoch lie buried beneath sand plains and salt chains. Modern watercourses, such as the Carey and Rayside drainages, do not carry surface water to the ocean. Instead, episodic floodwaters sink into porous calcrete layers and deep sands. Hydrogeologists from the Geological Survey of Western Australia have mapped these fossil river systems, proving that substantial aquifers flow silently beneath dry salt crusts. The water moves through ancient valleys carved when rainforest covered the Yilgarn Craton, entirely invisible from the air. Number 27. The coastal dunes stranded in red dirt. In the southern Mallee region of South Australia and northwestern Victoria, parallel east-west ridges rise up to 20 metres above the surrounding wheat country. These are not modern desert dunes, but ancient coastal stranded beach ridges formed during the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs, when the Murray Basin was covered by an inland sea known as the Moravian Gulf. As the sea retreated over several million years, wave action left successive lines of quartz sand across hundreds of kilometres. Farmers clear and crop the flats, yet the fossil shorelines remain anchored in place by mallee scrub, recording where ocean waves broke millions of years before the first human walked the country. Number 26. The frontier mapped by pastoral fences. Long before colonial boundary riders marked state borders with theodolites and star pickets, the lands of the Arunta, Pitjantjatjara, and Yunkunitjatjara peoples followed complex ecological boundaries determined by sacred sites, clay pans, and permanent waterholes known as nama holes. In the late 19th century, pastoral expansion introduced straight-line vermin exclusion fences, cutting across traditional travelling routes and drainage basins. Official land maps recorded these fences as the only boundaries that mattered, ignoring thousands of years of sophisticated land management systems that operated along natural catchment lines. Number 25. The Shire that feeds the pastoral markets. In the Channel Country of southwest Queensland, the Shire of Diamantina spans over 94,000 square kilometres, with a permanent population of fewer than 300 people. During periods of monsoonal rainfall in the north, water spills into the Georgina, Diamantina, and Cooper systems, flooding thousands of square kilometres of dry floodplains. When the floodwaters recede, high-protein native grasses such as Mitchell grass and Flinders grass emerge rapidly, turning arid clay flats into one of the country's most productive organic beef finishing zones. Pastoral companies move tens of thousands of cattle onto these ephemeral pastures, driven by a cyclical hydrological system that cannot be regulated by human engineering. Number 24. The boundary drawn by an astronomical error. The straight border separating South Australia from Victoria was set in the 1840s along the 141st meridian of east longitude. Surveyor Henry Wade and Assistant Surveyor Edward White attempted to mark the line on the ground through dense scrub and waterless terrain using chains and astronomical sightings. Due to instrument limitations and clock drift, they surveyed the line roughly 3.4 kilometres too far to the west. The physical border fence remained in the wrong position, excising over 1,000 square kilometres of territory from South Australia and creating a bitter legal dispute between the colonies that lasted until the Privy Council ruled in Victoria's favour in 1914. Number 23. The cold steppe inside a subtropical latitude. In the New England tablelands of New South Wales, towns like Guyra and Armidale sit at elevations exceeding 1,000 metres above sea level, producing a subalpine climate with regular winter snowfalls at a latitude otherwise dominated by warm, temperate valleys. Soils derived from tertiary basalt flows support distinct grassy woodland ecosystems dominated by snow gums and mountain gums. European pastoralists planted cold-climate deciduous trees that mimic the appearance of the Northern Hemisphere, sitting on a high plateau that catches freezing southwesterly air masses straight from the Southern Ocean. Number 22. The stone outpost on the desert track. Deep in the red sand country of the Tanami Desert along the Canning Stock Route, Well 37 and the ruins of historical outposts sit isolated hundreds of kilometres from the nearest settlement. Surveyed by Alfred Canning between 1906 and 1910 to move cattle from the Kimberley to the goldfields, the route relied on 51 hand-dug wells, tapping subterranean aquifers along traditional Aboriginal trading routes. The stone surrounds and abandoned windlasses remain fixed in the arid earth, physical relics of an extreme logistical corridor carved into country where surface water is completely absent. Number 21. The letters from the shifting dunes. During the prolonged Federation drought between 1895 and 1902, pastoral stations in far western New South Wales suffered catastrophic topsoil loss as bare paddocks blew into massive dust storms. In the archives of the Geological Survey of New South Wales, detailed correspondence from pastoral inspectors described sand drifts burying stone homesteads, fence lines disappearing beneath dunes, and stock numbers collapsing by over 60%. These early field accounts provided the first systematic record of severe wind erosion in Australia, establishing that native vegetation could not withstand continuous overgrazing in an arid cycle. How did these extreme environmental pressures force scientists to uncover the massive subterranean forces shaping the continent's modern geography? Number 20. The inland river that breaches its own basin. The Finke River, known to Arrernte people as Larapinta, flows through central Australia across the McDonnell Ranges. Geomorphologists from the University of Melbourne and Geoscience Australia have established that its deeply incised meanders were established prior to the Alice Springs orogeny hundreds of millions of years ago. The river did not divert around rising mountain ridges. Instead, it cut directly through them as the ranges slowly uplifted. It is widely documented as one of the oldest river channels on Earth, an antecedent drainage system running through ancient quartzites that predates the emergence of terrestrial vertebrate life. Number 19. The salt pans that generate dust fronts. In the Lake Eyre Basin, Cathy-Thander Lake Eyre sits at roughly 15 meters below sea level, forming the terminal drainage point for 1/6 of the continent. Atmospheric scientists from the CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology utilize satellite radiometers and aerosol optical depth sensors to track massive mineral dust plumes originating from these dry lake beds. When intense low-pressure troughs cross the continent, fine clay and gypsum particles are lifted thousands of meters into the upper atmosphere, carrying essential iron nutrients all the way across the Tasman Sea to fertilize oceanic phytoplankton blooms. Number 18. The grid laid out across salt country. In the goldfields of Western Australia, towns like Menzies and Gwalia were platted between 1894 and 1900 with wide, regular street grids designed to accommodate camel teams and steam locomotives. Cadastral surveys from the Western Australian Department of Lands and Surveys show that survey parties laid out standard 30-metre-wide roads and municipal allotments regardless of the underlying granite domes or hypersaline clay pans. When underground reef mining declined in the 1930s, the populations contracted sharply, leaving vast geometric networks of surveyed streets etched into the red dirt where only scattered saltbush now grows. Number 17. The thermal fracture under the sedimentary cover. Beneath the flat pastoral plains of the Cooper Basin in northeast South Australia and southwest Queensland, high concentrations of radiogenic granites generate anomalous heat flows. Geothermal exploration wells drilled past 3,000 meters depth revealed rock temperatures exceeding 240 degrees Celsius. Hydrocarbon drill logs and seismic reflection profiles gathered over decades showed that the thick Mesozoic sedimentary cover acts as an insulating blanket, trapping heat generated by the slow radioactive decay of uranium, thorium, and potassium in the basement rocks. Number 16. The junction point of four borders. At Cameron Corner, the borders of New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia converge at 29 degrees south latitude and 141 degrees east longitude. Surveyed by John Brewer Cameron between 1880 and 1882, using a 5-inch theodolite and steel band chains, the corner post was driven into a remote sand ridge along the dingo fence. A traveller standing at the post stands at the meeting point of 3 separate jurisdictions, 3 distinct land administration systems, and 2 different time zones during daylight saving periods, all defined by an iron post anchored in shifting desert sand. Number 15. The survival record preserved in clay mounds. Across the Murray-Darling River corridor, thousands of ancestral oven mounds sit slightly elevated above the floodplain clays. Archaeological investigations employing radiocarbon and optically stimulated luminescence dating have demonstrated that First Nations communities constructed these earth structures over thousands of years to cook root vegetables and wetland resources. The burnt clay and charcoal layers within the mounds create alkaline microenvironments that preserve delicate fish otoliths and small mammal bones, providing an unbroken environmental and cultural record spanning back past the last glacial maximum. Number 14. The buried meteor crater beneath the dunes. Near the Cooper Creek in southwest Queensland, the Tukanuka impact structure lies completely concealed beneath hundreds of meters of Cretaceous sedimentary rock. Invisible at the surface, the crater spans roughly 66 kilometers in diameter. It was discovered in the 1980s when petroleum geologists analyzed seismic reflection profiles and exploratory drill cores, which revealed shocked quartz grains and shatter cones created by a hypervelocity cosmic impact roughly 125 million years ago. What happens when these hidden subterranean structures and ancient records directly collide with modern settlement and heavy industry? Number 13. The concrete silos dominating flat horizons. Across the wheat belt of New South Wales and Victoria, bulk grain handling facilities at sites like Temora, Parkes and Nil rise over 30 metres above the plains. Constructed by state grain handling authorities from the 1920s onward, these reinforced concrete terminal structures replaced millions of jute grain bags with automated elevator systems. Each complex holds upwards of 50,000 tons of wheat, barley and canola. In flat topography where administrative centres consist of single-storey timber and tin buildings, these industrial terminals function as the regional landmark, defining rail branch line geography across the entire grain corridor. Number 12. The speculative township in the scrub. In the 1920s, land promoters in South Australia platted subdivisions in arid mallee scrub near modern Tailem Bend, selling residential blocks to interstate buyers who were told a major inland river port and rail hub would emerge. When buyers visited their allotments, they found deep sand drifts, dense eucalyptus roots, and no surface water within 20 kilometres. The titles remained tied up in state revenue offices for decades, a legal lattice of unbuilt suburban avenues permanently registered across uninhabitable sand plains. Number 11. The native vegetation trapped in road reserves. In the heavily cleared agricultural belts of southwest Western Australia and central Victoria, upwards of 90% of the original eucalyptus woodland was removed for broadacre cropping. The only intact remnants of native ecosystems survive along 4-chain and 3-chain government road reserves and railway corridors surveyed in the 19th century. Botanists from state herbariums document rare orchids and endangered flora holding on inside these narrow 50-metre strips, surrounded on both sides by thousands of hectares of monoculture wheat. Number 10. The road cuttings exposing the ancient sea. Driving along the Flinders Highway across northwestern Queensland, excavations and road cuttings between Richmond and Julia Creek expose soft marine mudstones of the Cretaceous Rolling Downs group. Formed between 110 and 100 million years ago when the inland Eromanga Sea covered central Australia, these road cuts regularly weather out belemnites, ammonites and marine reptile vertebrae during seasonal downpours. Road crews grading road verges regularly unearth complete plesiosaur and ichthyosaur fossil material, exposing a prehistoric seabed straight into the modern table drains. Number 9. The highway built on ancient trade routes. The Stuart Highway cuts north to south across 3,000 kilometres of the interior from Port Augusta to Darwin. When surveyor John McDougall Stuart successfully crossed the continent between 1860 and 1862, he followed established First Nations trading paths that connected permanent soakages, spring groups, and rock holes across Arrernte, Warramungu, and Jingili country. When military engineers sealed the overland corridor during the Second World War to supply Darwin, they laid bitumen directly over Stuart's track, locking an ancient transcontinental communication network into Australia's primary freight spine. Number 8. The seasonal contract fleets moving across the grain belt. Every October, the grain harvest begins in central Queensland and sweeps southward through New South Wales and Victoria to finish in southern Western Australia by January. Custom harvesting contractors move massive fleets of combine harvesters, chaser bins, and road trains across thousands of kilometres of regional highways. This transient logistics operation moves over 30 million tonnes of grain to port terminals annually, relying entirely on heavy transport corridors designed to withstand 30-metre multi-trailer configurations on rural bitumen. Number 7. The border towns split across 2 clocks. On the southern coast along the boundary between New South Wales and Victoria, but more acutely at Tweed Heads and Coolangatta on the New South Wales and Queensland border, a single contiguous town is split along Boundary Street. Because New South Wales observes daylight saving time while Queensland remains on Eastern Standard Time through summer, the legal crossing of a 4-lane municipal road shifts the clock by 1 full hour. Local businesses, emergency services, and commercial transport operators maintain dual rosters and 2 clock faces to manage administrative and operational conflicts across a single urban street. What makes the final group of Australian geographic anomalies so remarkable is that they define the basic limits of human settlement across the entire continent. Number 6. The town that lived beneath the surface. At Coobapedy in the Stuart Ranges of northern South Australia, surface temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius during summer. Following the discovery of opal in 1915, miners realized that living above ground required unsustainable cooling energy. They carved subterranean homes, churches, and hotels directly into the soft Cretaceous siltstone beds. Known as dugouts, these underground spaces maintain a natural, constant, year-round temperature between 21 and 24 degrees Celsius. What looks from the air like an arid plain riddled with thousands of white conical mullica is an entirely functional subterranean town built entirely within the mining stratigraphy. Number 5. The town degazetted and erased from signs. In the Pilbara region of Western Australia, the town of Wittenoom was built around the mining and milling of blue asbestos, crocidolite, in Wittenoom Gorge between 1943 and 1966. Millions of tons of tailings were distributed across roads, school playgrounds, and gardens. Because the airborne fibers cause mesothelioma and other fatal pulmonary illnesses, the state government formally degazetted the townsite in 2007, disconnected the power grid, and passed legislation to compulsorily acquire the remaining private land. Main Roads Western Australia removed the town from regional highway signage and official state road maps to deter travellers, creating an excised settlement that officially no longer exists. Number 4. The surveyed meridian displaced along its entire length. The official border between South Australia and New South Wales was established in the 19th century along the 141st meridian of east longitude. Surveyed on the ground from 1868 by John Cameron and Edward Smalley using transit theodolites and chronometers, later satellite positioning by Geoscience Australia confirmed that the physical surveyed boundary sits approximately 130 metres east of the true astronomical meridian. Because the marked line was entrenched in state statutes and property titles, the discrepancy was formalised, leaving the legal state line permanently out of alignment with the meridian it was meant to follow. Number 3. The buried deposit discovered through geophysical anomalies. In the Stuart Shelf of South Australia, the Olympic Dam iron oxide copper-gold deposit sits entirely concealed beneath 300 to 500 metres of flat-lying sedimentary rock. There were no surface outcrops, gossans, or minerals showing in the red dirt. In 1975, Western Mining Corporation geologists discovered the ore body by targeting coincident gravity and magnetic anomalies identified in regional geophysical maps. It proved to be one of the largest single accumulations of copper, uranium, and gold on the planet, an immense geological system identified entirely by remote physical measurement through an unbroken rock cover. Number 2. The ancient aquaculture carved into volcanic basalt. At Budge Bim in southwestern Victoria, the Gunditjmara people engineered an extensive aquaculture system across thousands of hectares of basalt lava flows from Mount Eccles. Commencing over 6,000 years ago, they cut channels, constructed basalt stone weirs, and installed woven traps to regulate water levels and systematically harvest short-finned eels. Radiocarbon dating of sediment layers and physical stone alignments confirm this as one of the oldest recorded continuous hydraulic engineering systems on Earth, mapped in full detail only after bushfires cleared the thick tea tree scrub in 2020. Number 1. The continent shifting faster than its coordinates. Australia sits on the fastest moving continental tectonic plate on Earth, drifting north-northeast towards the equator at approximately 7 centimetres per year. By 2017, the physical landmass had drifted more than 1.5 metres away from the coordinates established by the geocentric datum of Australia, 1994. Geoscience Australia had to formally recalibrate the national datum to the geocentric datum of Australia, 2020, to align satellite global navigation systems with physical boundaries on the ground. The land is not stationary, it moves across the mantle while the coordinate grid is forced to catch up. What kept these anomalies hidden for generations was never a lack of physical evidence, but an official reliance on static administrative maps that assumed an ancient, arid continent was uniform, motionless, and empty. Geoscientists and First Nations custodians continue to document buried river channels and subsurface fractures using airborne laser scanning and deep seismic arrays, racing to record fragile hydrological systems before modern extraction and erosion alter them forever. The official map appears complete, but the ground beneath it remains active, shifting, and largely unwritten. Which geographic anomaly in your own state or territory has always seemed out of place to you? Subscribe to follow our ongoing investigations into the hidden geography of the continent.